Imagine a world where money is so worthless that it is cheaper to burn it for heat than to buy firewood. Imagine walking into a cafe, ordering a cup of coffee for 5,000 marks, and by the time you finish drinking it, the price has risen to 8,000. Imagine getting paid daily, sometimes twice a day, because if you wait even a few hours to spend your paycheck, it won't even buy you a loaf of bread. This isn't a dystopian fiction. This was Germany in 1923. It is the most terrifying economic collapse in modern history. In less than a decade, one of the most powerful, industrial, and educated nations on earth saw its currency evaporate. They went from trading gold to trading wheelbarrows full of paper trash. We have all seen the pictures: children building pyramids out of stacks of cash in the gutters, people wallpapering their living rooms with banknotes because it was cheaper than buying actual wallpaper. But the pictures don't explain why. How does a government destroy its own money? Most history books tell you it was just the Treaty of Versailles. That is a lie. Or at least, it is only half the truth. The real story is about a gamble. It is about a financial weapon that backfired, a government that was too cowardly to tax its citizens, and a spiral of debt that paved the way for the darkest chapter in human history. Today, we aren't just looking at inflation. We are looking at the death of money. To understand the collapse, we have to go back to when Germany was on top of the world. In 1914, before the first shot of World War I was fired, the German gold mark was one of the strongest currencies on the planet. It was backed by gold. It was stable. The German economy was the envy of Europe, a powerhouse of steel, chemicals, and engineering. When the war started, Germany needed money. Wars are expensive. Bullets, boots, canned food, artillery shells. They cost billions. The British and the French paid for the war largely through taxes. They taxed their citizens to fund the army. It was unpopular, but it was honest mathematics. Germany took a different path. The Kaiser and his government decided not to raise taxes. They were afraid that high taxes would turn the public against the war. Instead, they suspended the gold standard, which meant they could print more paper money than they had gold to back it up. They borrowed heavily, selling war bonds to their own citizens. The logic was simple, arrogant, and dangerous. The German leadership told the people, "Give us your savings. We will win the war quickly. When we conquer France and Russia, we will force them to pay off our debt." Germany bet everything on victory. They treated the war like a leveraged business investment. If they won, the enemy would pay the bill. The printed money would be covered by the plunder of Europe. It was the ultimate financial gamble. But, as we know, they didn't win quickly. The war dragged on for 4 brutal years. And the printing presses kept running. The debt mountain kept growing. By 1918, the German mark had already lost half its value, but nobody noticed yet because the government used strict price controls and propaganda to hide the inflation. They kept the illusion of stability alive, even as the foundation was rotting away. Then came the defeat. Germany didn't just lose the war, they lost the gamble. There would be no plunder from France. There would be no gold from Russia. The German people were left holding war bonds that were suddenly extremely risky. The illusion shattered, and then came the bill. The Treaty of Versailles. The Allies, specifically France, were furious. They had lost a generation of young men, their fields were churned into mud, and their economy was battered. They wanted Germany to pay for the entire war. They demanded 132 billion gold marks in reparations. This figure was impossible. It was arguably more gold than existed in all of Europe at the time. John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist present at the peace conference, stormed out, warning that this debt would destroy the German economy and lead to another war. He was ignored. The Allies wanted blood. So now, picture the situation in 1919. You have a broken nation. It has massive internal debt from the war bonds it sold to its own people. It has massive external debt from the reparations it owes to the Allies. Its industry is shattered. Its population is starving due to the British naval blockade. A responsible government might have cut spending. They might have raised taxes to painful levels to pay down the debt slowly. But the new Weimar Republic was fragile. They were terrified of a communist revolution. If they raised taxes or cut wages, the people might revolt. So the Weimar government felt they had no choice. They looked at the printing press in the corner of the room, and they turned it on. At first, the inflation wasn't a disaster. It was actually comfortable. The government printed money to pay its workers, to pay welfare, and to buy foreign currency to pay the reparations. This abundance of cash made business boom briefly. Because the mark was getting weaker, German exports became cheap for other countries to buy. Unemployment vanished because factories were busy. But inflation is like a drug. The initial high feels good, but you need more and more to get the same effect. By 1922, the cracks were showing. Prices were doubling every few months. The wealthy began to move their money into foreign currencies or assets. The poor began to notice their wages didn't stretch as far. But the real death blow, the moment the patient went terminal, came in January 1923. Germany fell behind on a reparation payment. In response, France and Belgium lost patience. They sent their armies to invade the Ruhr Valley. The Ruhr was Germany's industrial heartland, full of coal mines and steel mills. The French intended to occupy the region and take the payments in goods. They would take the coal and steel directly from the ground. The German government couldn't fight back militarily. Their army had been dismantled by the peace treaty. So they ordered a strategy of passive resistance. They told the German workers in the Ruhr, "Do not work for the French. Go on strike. Refuse to dig the coal. We, the government in Berlin, will still pay your wages." Think about the economics of that for a second. The government ordered its most productive workers to stop producing, but it promised to keep paying them full wages. So you have money flooding into the system to pay these striking workers, but no goods, no coal, no steel being created to buy with that money. Supply dropped to near zero. Demand, in the form of paper money, went to infinity. This is the textbook definition of hyperinflation. The printing presses began to run 24 hours a day. They employed thousands of people just to print the currency. They couldn't even find enough paper to print the money on. And this is where the madness truly begins. By the summer of 1923, the currency collapsed completely. The numbers ceased to have meaning. In 1914, one US dollar was worth 4 marks. By July 1923, one US dollar was worth 353,000 marks. By August, 4 million. By September, 100 million. By November, one US dollar was worth 4.2 trillion marks. The price of goods didn't just rise, it exploded. Men would run to the bakery as soon as they got paid because the price of bread would double by dinner time. Waiters in restaurants would stand on chairs and announce new prices on the menu every 30 minutes. There is a famous story from this time of a man who brought a wheelbarrow full of cash to the bakery to buy 2 loaves of bread. He left the wheelbarrow outside for a moment to check the line. When he came back, he found that thieves had dumped the money on the street and stolen the wheelbarrow. The wheelbarrow was a real asset. The money was trash. Society began to break down. The middle class was wiped out. People who had saved their whole lives, doctors, professors, civil servants, saw their retirement savings turn into nothing. A lifetime of savings that could once buy a house now couldn't even buy a newspaper. On the other hand, if you had debt, you were the luckiest person alive. Imagine you had a mortgage of 50,000 marks on a large house. Suddenly, you could sell a single egg from your chicken, get 50,000 marks, and pay off your entire house mortgage with the proceeds of 1 egg. The biggest winner was a man named Hugo Stinnes, the inflation king. He was an industrialist who borrowed massive amounts of marks to buy up factories, mines, and newspapers. He paid off his loans later with worthless paper money. He eventually owned 1/6 of German industry. He became fabulously wealthy while the rest of the country starved. But for the average person, it was a nightmare. Farmers refused to sell their food for paper money. Why would they? By the time they walked to the bank, the money would be worthless. So city dwellers formed raiding parties. They would take trains out to the countryside, the so-called hamster trips, to barter for food. They traded family heirlooms, pianos, wedding rings, and expensive coats, just for a sack of potatoes or a side of pork. The psychological toll was devastating. Doctors reported a new mental illness they called zero stroke. It affected people who had to calculate these astronomical numbers every day. People would become dizzy, confused, and unable to perform basic math, overwhelmed by the sheer absurdity of paying billions for a tram ticket. Crime skyrocketed. Prostitution became rampant, as it was the only way for many to feed their families. The moral fabric of society was disintegrating. People lost faith in everything, the government, the law, and the future. When money, the thing that measures the value of your labor, becomes meaningless, then labor itself feels meaningless. It is no coincidence that in this exact moment of peak chaos, November 1923, a relatively unknown political agitator named Adolf Hitler decided the time was right to strike. With the economy in ruins and the people furious, Hitler staged the Beer Hall Putsch in Munich, attempting to overthrow the government. He jumped onto a table, fired a pistol into the ceiling, and declared the national revolution. The coup failed. The police opened fire, Hitler was arrested and thrown in jail, where he would write Mein Kampf. But the lesson is vital. Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy bank accounts, it destroys political stability. It radicalizes normal people. It makes them desperate for a savior, even a dangerous one. But back in Berlin, the government finally realized they had to stop the bleeding. The printing presses had to stop. Enter Hjalmar Schacht, the currency commissioner. He was an arrogant, brilliant financial wizard who was given the impossible job of fixing a currency that had no value. On November 15, 1923, Schacht introduced a new currency, the Rentenmark. Now Germany had no gold left, so how could they back this new money? Schacht pulled a psychological trick. He said the Rentenmark was backed by the land and industrial goods of Germany. Essentially, he mortgaged the entire country. It was a theoretical backing, but it sounded solid. He set the exchange rate. One new Rentenmark was worth 1 trillion old marks. It was a reset button. People carted their wheelbarrows of trillions to the banks and exchanged them for a handful of Rentenmarks. But the most important thing Schacht did wasn't financial. It was behavioral. He stopped the printing presses. He told the government, if you run out of money, you cannot print more. You must cut spending or raise taxes. No more printing. It was a harsh shock. The drug of easy money was cut off. Bankruptcies spiked. Unemployment rose. But the fever broke. The prices stopped rising. For the first time in years, a German worker knew that the money he earned on Monday would still be worth something on Friday. The miracle of the Rentenmark worked. The economy stabilized. The golden 20s began. Germany survived the hyperinflation of 1923, but the scars never healed. The middle class had been expropriated. They had played by the rules, saved their money, and been punished for it, while speculators and debtors got rich. This deep sense of unfairness, this feeling that the system is rigged, didn't disappear when the currency was fixed. It festered. When the next crisis hit, the Great Depression in 1929, those same people who lost everything in 1923 were not willing to trust the democratic government again. They remembered the wheelbarrows. They remembered the starvation. And this time, when the man with the mustache offered them a radical solution, they listened. The story of the German hyperinflation is a lesson that echoes today. It teaches us that money is not real. It is a shared illusion, a pact of trust between a government and its people. When a government abuses that trust, when it tries to print its way out of reality, the illusion breaks, and when the money dies, civilization itself is never far behind. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think a hyperinflation event like this could happen in a modern economy today? Or have we learned our lesson? Let me know below.